Hello, and welcome to Mind Your Head, a space for people to share their stories, talk openly and honestly about their own mental health challenges, and to give some listeners some comfort in knowing you're not alone. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land in which we record this podcast, the Gubbi Gubbi people. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all Indigenous peoples. We honour their enduring connection to the land, waters and culture, and recognise their invaluable contributions they make to our communities. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. This episode is proudly supported by True Protein. Use the code MindYourHead at the checkout to score $25 off your next order. Lockie, welcome to Mind Your Head, mate. So stoked to have you on the podcast today. Been a massive fan of the work and the message that you're spreading, and I sort of came across, obviously your podcast, but I came across all your videos on TikTok and Instagram, and they really struck a chord with me, and so stoked to sit down with you today and have a chat.
Thanks, brother. It's always nice to hear that sort of feedback, you know. Sort of makes me want to keep doing it a lot more, and man, I'm absolutely honoured to be in your space today and sharing the mics with you, and I have no doubt that we'll get some deep conversations out of today's episode.
Thanks, brother. And my first impressions was someone that is so comfortable being uncomfortable, so comfortable being vulnerable, and speaking your mind, speaking your truth, and have you always been like that, or has that sort of been a growth for you even since you were a little kid?
It hasn't always been like this, man, for sure. I think the way that I've navigated it to get to a place where I've landed today is, there was definitely a lot of adversity growing up, and a lot of my own sort of, speed bumps I had to hurdle over and get to a place where I can be comfortable being vulnerable. And I think my perspective on being vulnerable is, vulnerability is a gateway to growth. And I think if you can allow yourself to be vulnerable, open yourself up to people online, whether it be, through videoing or messaging, I think there's so much light that you can be able to instill within your own self from that, and the growth that you can come from, allowing people's perspectives and advice sort of capture into your own life. I think it's definitely a catalyst and deep change for sure.
And I don't know if you're familiar with Brené Brown at all. She's got a few books around vulnerability, and she talks about, creating a deep and lasting connection with someone. It doesn't have to be in person. It can be online, and, it doesn't, what she say, it's got nothing to do with sort of how rich you are or how funny you are or how smart you are. It's about how you make people feel. That determines a deep and lasting friendship. And she says that being vulnerable is like the quickest and easiest way to make a lasting connection with someone. So going back to sort of your childhood, how was it growing up? What sort of kid were you? And what sort of challenges did you go through?
Yeah, man. So growing up for me, I grew up in Brizzy with my family. We're all super close. I think growing up, having my parents split up before I was even born, that was definitely, to some people that's quite different, but to me that was my normal. So I think right off the bat there was a bit of adjustment there, and that became my norm. And I think I always saw other people who had parents who were together as different, as now that I know that's not the way it should be, right? So I think growing up, having a bit of a split family in that regards, and the chopping and changing between, families, one's weekend and then the next the other, I think that navigated my perspective a little bit differently growing up. I always thought I was a little bit different for having the family that I did. And I always thought that I had to, be the class clown or sort of this and all that. But growing up, man, I always knew that there was something a little bit different with the way that I operated, whether it be the way I showed up in class. I was a bit of a shit kid, if I'm going to be honest. I'm sure we can get deep into that. But growing up, I always sort of had to impress people or, do something out of the ordinary to get attention, because all these other people with, wholesome families were getting the attention from, having the relatability from other people in the, in the cohort of having, same families and stuff. And it always landed me in a place of I had to sort of act different to be able to feel like I fit in. And growing up, there was a bit of a lack of self-worth for sure. And that's what, led me into some different paths during my life. But growing up, I was always, the bit of the class clown, the person who was always acting up, who was always in trouble. I was a very different kid, and that all played a part in, I guess, my journey and where I've landed today for sure.
Was it a little bit of people pleasing there to get some attention, or it was?
Yeah, well, of course, man. I'd always be the first person to say yes to doing that stupid thing, or geeing up everyone else for me to go and do this or that, and create a laugh or whatnot. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of people pleasing growing up, just so I could feel validated.
Yeah. Was there any like open dialogue with your parents around how you were feeling at that time?
Growing up, I was about 8 or 9. I started seeing a psychologist because there was patterns from me being a kid. And I think one of the biggest things was mum had cancer quite young for me, and that was I guess a huge turning point in the kid who I became. That's when I sort of really started to go off the rails in terms of like my schooling, my academics. I've never been academically smart, and I've always had these patterns of life growing up, and mum saw that I was struggling a lot, so she got me into a psychologist quite early. So I was seeing a psychologist for many years there as a result of what was happening in the family, and I think being 8 or 9, I didn't really have the self-awareness of what cancer really is. I thought I was going to lose my mum at such a young age. I thought I was going to wake up one day and her not be there. I remember when she told me one day, we were in the kitchen. I remember it vividly. We were living out in Redland Bay in Brizzy, and I turned around to the corner to the kitchen, and she was like, "Lockie, I have to show you something." And I'm like, "Okay, what's that?" And then she pulled off her her head thing, what she was wearing, to show that she had no hair left. And I was just like, "Are you dying?" And that was a big thing for me growing up. I was so scared of losing my mum that I acted out in a way that was malicious to people around me and to my own self. I think from a very young age, there was huge patterns of self-sabotage, and me being the way I was, that was just a reflection of that for sure. So I think growing up, having the thought process that I'm going to lose my mum at 9 years of age to cancer, that was huge in my journey in the way that I sort of ended up as a kid.
Is your mum still around?
Yeah.
Oh, so she beat cancer?
Yeah, she beat cancer, bro, which is awesome, man. She's an absolute gem. She's an angel. She is a light what shines through the clouds. Mum is...
You're super close with your mum?
Yeah, super close, bro. Yeah, she's probably one of my best friends for sure.
Yeah, nice.
And it's really nice. There was a lot of push and pull growing up because, of course she wanted the best for me, but I was doing the complete opposite. She sort of noticed the self-sabotage behaviours, and all she ever wanted was the best for me. But I think she understands now that, the depth of having cancer and telling that to a kid, like that's pretty heavy.
Absolutely.
But yeah, she's made a full recovery, which is so beautiful.
So good.
Yeah, bro. So
what was the turning point for you? Like, going through that self-sabotage, playing up at school, trying to get that attention. How bad did that get for you? And then what was the turning point to sort of get you out of that headspace?
Well, I mean, I was suspended almost every second week from school. I've been expelled from private schools. Mum and dad, they always did a lot for me to try and get me the best education I could, but I just resisted it because I just had no interest in it at all. And I guess that was just my whole childhood. I was always, I always had a tutor because I just didn't apply myself. Yeah, man. I just did not apply myself at all. I couldn't think of anything worse than going to school. It was... 15, 16 years of just absolute hell for me for what it felt like. Sorry, 12 years.
Felt like 15.
Yeah, felt like 15, man, for sure. But yeah, man, there was definitely, I guess the biggest turning point was, I navigated a lot. I finished schooling through TAFE, the secondary schooling, because I just didn't fit the means of the normal mainstream schooling. And that was just the kid I was, and sort of the stuff that I was getting into was a big result of that. But I wouldn't say there was a huge turning point in terms of my schooling, because I struggled from the very last day.
Yeah, right. And then sort of moving forward after school, did the relationship with your sort of mum and dad get a little bit better? Did the relationship with yourself get a little bit better?
Yeah, man, for sure. Growing up, Dad and I, we had a very broken relationship. From my point of view, and this is probably the reason why I lacked a lot of self-worth. And this is sort of the stuff that I'm working on currently through timeline therapy and stuff that I'm doing with my coach and psychologist now. But growing up, I always thought love was transactional and that I had to perform and succeed in order to receive love from my dad. Now I've realized that him growing up as a kid, he wasn't shown the love that he needed. So how can he give something that he doesn't have? Of course, I didn't have that self-awareness back then though. So I always said, I was almost like I grew up with resentment towards dad. And that caused a lot of fights and a lot of arguments throughout the family. There was always, it got quite broken. And that was another reason why I kept on acting out and following the wrong crowd, was because I was always trying to fill the void of self-worth. And I feel like if I was to get attention from everyone else, then I was validated. So that was my journey in terms of that. But yeah, man, now my dad's my best mate. Yeah. I call him almost every day. Him and I, we're super close. And we've had some conversations around this stuff too. And it's been really nice to be able for him to land in a place of vulnerability. So he can talk to me about some of the stuff that he experienced. I know Dad's full life story. And I think growing up, of course I didn't know that knowledge, but now I have so much respect for him because he's opened his heart to me and he's showed me and he's told me all the things that he went through and some of the adversity that he faced. And it's almost like I love him more of it.
100%. I resonate so much with that because I had my dad on the podcast and I went through some pretty bad mental health struggles, and we grew up in a house where it was all positivity and happiness. So no one really talked about struggles. No one sort of talked about anything sort of bad in the house, and I never knew why. They always had fights, always sort of tried to keep it under wraps and try to hide things from us. And so that's just the way I grew up. I grew up thinking if you had something wrong, you'd push it deep down inside and wouldn't tell anyone. And I had whispers that Dad had a really bad childhood. Him and Mum are from New Zealand. Dad never talked about his family, never talked about his brothers, never ever spoke about his childhood. Grandparents, nothing. And I thought that was strange. It was the same thing as you. I always go around to people's places, always grandparents are around, cousins are around, aunties and uncles are around. We never had that growing up. It was just our family. We never had that. And I was thinking, that's a bit strange. Why don't we hang around with our grandparents or anything like that? And I, when I made the podcast, one of my guests, I was like, Dad, how about you come on the podcast? I'll tell you everything that I've never told you, and you can tell me everything that you've never told me.
It's powerful. Hey?
It was the best. And, I found out that, Dad had a extremely abusive father. So my grandfather, he came back from the war and he was alcoholic, schizophrenic, and pretty much tortured my dad and the other siblings. Dad would fall asleep to, he's raping my dad's mum. And my dad's, 13 years old next door, hearing that as a 13-year-old, and he grew up in so much violence. And what he realized was a coping mechanism and a surviving tool was, if you showed no emotion, his dad wouldn't prey on you. He would leave you alone. But if you arced up, showed emotion, stuff like that, you would get more punishment. So what Dad learned was just to keep his emotions away and don't show any of it. And when he's grown up, become a father, you change things that affected you most, right? So Dad changed no alcohol, no violence, nothing in the house. Our household was so calm and peaceful and safe. But in turn of that, there was no emotional dialogue at all because Dad was just completely shut off. So that's how we sort of grew up. And doing the podcast with him, doing the episode with him, man, he told me everything that was going on in his childhood, and I told him everything that was going on. I told him sort of, the reasons why I couldn't say anything because you didn't show me ways to do it when we were a kid. I mimic you. You can always, that's why I talk to a lot of parents is kids don't listen to what you say. They watch how you live, So I said to Dad, you didn't show me how to be vulnerable. You didn't show me how to talk about my feelings because we never did it at our household. For my whole life, we never spoke about our feelings. And it's not putting blame on anyone. That's just, and now him telling me his story, I get it. All the dots are connecting. I get why you are the way that you are because we used to butt heads all the time. Why is Dad a dickhead? Now our relationship's so nice and he's changed so much and he talks about his feelings all the time to me now. And I love it. I absolutely love it. And that was the sort of initially, like the reason behind the podcast is like, I think a lot of us walk around each other, whether it's family and friends, and actually don't know the deep versions of ourselves. You know, it's always like that surface level stuff, and we never actually ask proper questions to get to know each other a bit better. And I think that was like the biggest turning point in mine and his relationship, is having that podcast. His dad was like, we were never going to sit down at the coffee table at home and have that chat. Like, we had to be locked in a room with mics and a camera for us to actually have a proper, you know, conversation about our feelings and what was going on. And I definitely resonate with that, because he's just like my best mate. Like, I used to look at him as like this, you know, authority figure, and I was too scared to tell him stories of, you know, of the past and things I used to get up to, and let's have that. And now it's just like, we're two mates now. You know, I'm not scared to just to tell him things. He's not scared to like say anything to me. Like, if anything, we're probably too open with each other now.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's great. Like, I absolutely love it. Yeah.
It's crazy how, you know, so much chaos and so much, I guess, volatile sort of situations come to a place of, you know, peaceful and fulfillment, especially in relationships, man.
Yeah.
If Dad didn't go through the stuff he went through growing up, the trauma that he got, you know, that chaos and that sort of amount of disruption that he experienced, he wouldn't be able to land into a place of being able to be vulnerable. It's like the catch-22 what we were talking about before air.
Yeah.
And it's like there's so much. You know, you have a positive leather and then a negative layer on absolutely everything.
And they always come with each other, don't they?
Yeah.
What was your darkest time? I know you said you're getting expelled from school, and, you know, your mum telling you she's got cancer and you're worrying about sort of if she's going to live or not. Was there a really, really dark time in your life where, it wasn't worth living?
Yeah, man.
There was?
So when I was 15, this is where all of my mental health, I guess, advocating sort of stemmed from. At 15, one of my really close friends, he committed suicide. It was May 25th, 2017. And it was that really struck a chord in me of, you know, where society is at with the stigma. I saw him the day before he committed suicide, and I said to him, "Oh, I'll see you tomorrow, brother. Love you, man." Gave him a hug, and he goes, "Of course, brother. See you tomorrow. Can't wait to see you." The next morning, I get the news that he was found hanging from his garage floor by his brother. And that was the first moment of me realizing, like, men, we struggle. Like 15, how 15, why did Stuart feel the need that his days weren't worth living, that he had to remove himself from life? On the outside, he was the most happiest, the most jolly, the most, you know, beautiful young boy, young man. And he still felt the need that he didn't want to be here anymore. And so he acted on that. And from then I sort of went on a huge journey. I was still suffering from a lack of self-worth, unworthiness. I was still trying to fit in with the crowd. And by me dealing with the grief from one of my really close friends at such a young age, I started acting out and going down the pathway of, you know, drugs and alcohol, and one thing led to another. And then, you know, from 15 until, man, I'm 23, and even, you know, I've had some slip-ups in the last 12 months with that stuff. But from that journey, I started smoking weed at 15, and I started smoking cigarettes too, and just sort of following that crowd. And then the weed turned into MD, and I was doing MD every single weekend for years. I was, you know, doing anything from like, you know, 0.5 gram to 1 gram a weekend. And then at 17, I had my first line of coke, and that was the beginning of the end of my soul. That stuff took my soul for many, many, many years. And it was just a way of dealing with the unworthiness I felt and a lack of self-love, and still not allowing myself to process the grief from one of my close friends at 15, you know, not showing up the next day to school. And so the darkest time, man, for sure. When I was living in Canada, freshly 20, I because the coke there is super cheap, I just got off the rails, absolutely off the rails. I was snorting, you know, 2 grams a day. If I'd go on benders, I wouldn't sleep for, you know, 3 or 4 days. I'd sit there with like 25 empty bags in front of me, just off this head, off the planet. And there's a few times where I've been laying on my floor of my apartment, convulsing, you know, overdosing on the stuff, and it was just a reflection of my mindset and how I felt about myself internally. I was looking for anything to get a hit, get a craving, just so I could feel a sense of a high or someone different to who I actually am, sober. And there's definitely been times where, going through my early stages of addiction where I was like, I just don't want to be here anymore. Like, I don't want to be here. There's been nights where I've been sending messages to my mates like, I love you, bro. Like, thanks for everything, but I just don't feel worth. And then the first thing to do that, they started calling me. So I've had a lot of friends sort of save my life in that aspect, but there's definitely been times where I've almost acted on hanging up the rope. I guess one of the darkest times in terms of that was when I come home from Australia. I was still dabbling into that lifestyle. And there was one morning I was driving home from a kick on. Horrible anyway. And that was probably about a year and a half ago, and I was sort of coming down and I was having all these dark thoughts, and I was just like driving. I'm like, fuck this. And I was driving, there was a bunch of trees, and my hand was like twitching to pull myself into the tree and just to literally end it all. You sort of go to the twitch, and then something just sort of grabbed the wheel and sort of held it back on the road. And that was, I think, sort of realized that was time to really seek some help. I was willing to wipe myself off the earth because of this horrible drug that took me for a ride for so many years. Another form of, I was 17, I'd just been accepted into the Navy. I think growing up, I always thought that I wanted to leave an impact in the world, or, serve the country in a way that's beneficial to us and the world. So I acted on my curiosity, and I went through the stages of enlistment into the Navy, and I got in. And it was a few months before I was going to get sent away for my basic training. I had all my enlistment papers ready. I got accepted. I got approved. And there was this one night I was coming home from a party. I was fresh 18. I had, Dad bought me a Ford Ranger for my birthday, and, going home from, stoked. I was going home from a party, and I was blind, absolutely blind, drunk, and I had a car full of people. I dropped all them home, and I was going back to the party to pick up more people. I was coming down this right-hand turn, doing about 90 k's an hour in about a 40 zone, and the back end spun out, and it was like a divine slap. It felt like someone just slapped out the rear end, and I went down embankment. The wheels grabbed into the ditch, and I flipped the car. I landed on the roof and did a bit of a spin in the air, and like I landed, and I don't remember anything from the night except for that whole situation. And I just landed on the roof, and the roof was caving my head into the back of the headrest, and I was like, holy fuck, what have I just done? And that moment there, that terminated my enlistment to the Navy. I had to go to court, and I did all that sort of stuff, and I got I got kicked out essentially before I was even in. And that sent me down another big hole of even a deeper amount of abuse on the alcohol. I was looking at the bottom of the bottle every single day. It's at 18. I'd spend all my money on piss. I'd get any drug I can get my hand on, just so I could feel a sense of worth as a person and as a young man coming up into the cracks. I was still running from all my other problems, the stigma that's around men's mental health, and I felt like I couldn't talk because I feel like I was going to get judged. And it was still a reflection of not sort of processing the grief in a natural way from when Stuart passed from suicide. And I think there's been a few circumstances where I've come to the realization that life is worth living, but I wouldn't have come to that if I didn't go through all those sort of triumphs and those troubles, for sure.
It's interesting. Like, you have to I've definitely found my own way, but you have to hit rock bottom. And I've heard Simon Sinek talk about it, and it's just like people won't change until the fear of change outweighs the current pain of reality. That fear of changing, that fear of seeking help, that fear of, trying to be a better version of yourself. Like, we're so scared of it until that sort of fear outweighs that current pain. And I exactly resonate with a lot of what you said then, because, I went through a lot of times where I was feeling anxious and depressed when I was, 15, 16, 17, and was never into drugs. A little bit into alcohol. I wasn't really big into alcohol, but was never really into drugs. And then I remember I didn't know how to cope with my thoughts and the head noise. I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know how to silence it. I knew that rugby did it. When I played footy, it would silence it. But Sunday to Friday, what was I going to do then? And I remember I was in Canada. I got out of the army. I was like 21. I went to Canada with some of my good mates, and I remember having a few beers, and all of a sudden, like having the best time ever, and all of a sudden, I had this wave of like depression come over me, where it like stopped me in my tracks for like 5 minutes, and I was just sitting there, and I was just like almost an out of body experience where all my mates are drinking, having fun, and I'm just sitting there, and I'm like dwelling over nothing, but it feels like this deep sadness, and I'm like, what the fuck? What am I feeling like this for? And then all of a sudden, it just went away. I'm thinking, well, that was weird. Why did that just happen for? And then that was the very first time it felt like that when I was drinking. And I realized like from then, every time I drank, I would get it for about 5 or 10 minutes. And I was thinking, this sucks. Like, why do I have to do this for? Like, why can't I have fun and not feel like this? And then that sort of when I started taking drugs for the very first time, it was like the most euphoric feeling I've ever felt in my life, where it was at peace. Like, I was telling my mum, asked me this. She's like, you know, like people like get on drugs and go partying and stuff. And I said to her, I go, when I used to get on drugs, I used to sit down and I could just be like, be calm. I wouldn't have to party. I wouldn't have to go out. I would, but I could just sit here and like almost go to sleep because my mind was just at peace. It would just put my mind at ease. And yeah, that was like my form of escape. Like same with you, like having that, no, trying to, you know, not be myself, anything apart from myself. You know, I had moments where, you know, I was pretty young. I was probably like 21, 22, and I had moments where I'll be at someone's apartment, you know, and everyone would be at sleep at 3 a.m, and I don't want the high to end. I just want to keep it going. I don't want to go to bed because if I go to bed, I wake up and I'm me again. So I just want to keep it going and keep it going. I remember everyone's asleep 3 a.m, with, you know, 20 floors up. You know, and I remember just looking at the balcony. I've actually never said this before, but I remember like looking at the balcony and just going, like looking around and at the apartment and no one's around. And I just remember thinking, I could probably jump off that. You know, and that's a thought that didn't scare me at the time. That's a thought. I remember thinking about it, and it was as normal as going and grabbing a loaf of bread at the shops. Like it didn't scare me for some reason. Like I wasn't put off by that. I was like, I wonder if I would die. I wonder if I'd feel any pain if I did that. And I started really analyzing if that's an option or not. And that's how, like, looking back on it now, it's pretty obvious to see that I was in a really bad headspace where that was like a normal train of thought, you know, and that sort of led me down a very dark path where drugs was the only remedy I could find to cure the head noise. It was the only thing that I was just like, this is the best thing ever. You know, I was too afraid to look inner. I was too afraid to do the work. I was too afraid to talk to someone about it. I was like, I can't be fixed. This is just me. I'm always going to be like this. I'm never going to get any better. This is the best coping mechanism, was just to do as many drugs as I could. And, you know, now almost, you know, a year and a half sober now, haven't touched anything. And it's interesting now when I look back at that time and that period of Elliot, whereas, you know, it's the worst thing for you. The absolute worst thing for you. And I tell some of my friends who are sort of struggling with alcohol, or they're struggling with some things, I'm like, mate, they're so scared to talk about it and so scared to see someone. And I'm like, it is honestly the scariest thing, but the best thing you could possibly do. You know, I give so much respect for people that actually have the courage to speak up about it or actually go and do the work. And your life's always better. Like I talk to some rugby players and stuff like that, and they say no one's ever had a better life when they do more drugs and alcohol. Life has never gotten better for you. It always gets worse. Mm.
Yeah, man, I resent to that a lot. And one thing when you're talking about the balcony, yeah, I just got a bit of a flashback when I was having those overdoses on my apartment. There's a couple of times I was like, that balcony looks really good right now.
Mm.
And you know, God forbid, glad that we didn't act on it.
Mm.
But yeah, I think there's so many negatives what come from a life of alcohol and drugs. And at 17, I was really close with a girl. She was like my older bigger sister, my younger bigger sister sort of thing.
Mm.
And she was 10 months clean off meth, and she had a relapse and she overdosed and died. And that was like part of my soul was also ripped out too, man. There was just like having Stuart pass away and then having Zoe pass away, both from mental health related.
Mm.
It sort of brings up a bit of a new perspective on life. And you know, being clean, it's life is just so good. And I can definitely relate to you in that sense. And I love what you said before, that this period of Elliot. That's a really nice way to put it. Because definitely I look back now and like that period of Lockie, for sure. He's so far from who I am now.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important to capitalize on, for sure.
And like what I realized, because you know, I'm very I really admire that you're such a young age now where you can have that awareness. Like, you know, I didn't have the awareness until I was 30. You know, so I went through it from 19 to 30. You know, I talked about it with a friend before, that from 19 to 30 was a complete write-off for me. Complete write-off. Like, I had no spiritual, physical, mental, emotional growth at all. It was just like rugby, drugs and alcohol, you know. And I remember like sort of coming to when I was 30, and I don't know if that's just when the male brain matures, but for me, I hit 30 and I realized like, fucking, who am I? Who am I? Like, what have I been doing for the last 10 years? You know, and I was almost like came out of this dream that I was, all this black cloud that I was living in, and just thinking, what the hell do I want out of life? Like, I had no idea. I felt like a little boy, to be honest with you. Like, I had the emotional maturity of a 18-year-old, because I had nothing. It was just like a full write-off. And then when I meet people sort of like you at your age, and I just think, fuck it, man. Like, I try not to do that comparisons thing or anything like that, but I'm like, oh, I wish I came to when I was a little bit earlier, you know. But at the same time, like, I love the person I am, and I love the outlook I have in life, and you know, I don't hold any regrets or anything like that. Even though, you know, I upset a lot of people, I would have hurt a lot of people. You know, I broke up with a girlfriend that I was with for 5 years for no reason, thinking that she was the issue. You know, for all the shit that was going on in my head, I was always looking at external things. Oh, rugby's the issue. That coach doesn't like me. He's the issue. I changed teams. You know, oh shit, I still feel like this. I'll break up with her. She's like, why are you breaking up with me? I go, I have no idea, but you're the problem. In my head, I'm like, you're the problem.
Yeah.
As soon as I leave you, I'll start feeling better. She broke up. We broke up. She moved to England. Oh, I still feel like this. Maybe that's not it. And I was always looking for external things and never actually started to look inwards because I was so afraid of what I was going to find. How did you process the grief? How did you process those, you know, those thoughts that, you know, you didn't want to be around anymore? How did you sort of get past them?
I think talking to people, man.
Was it?
Yeah, definitely when I started to really open myself up. I think when I was going through the depth of my addictions, a lot of my close friends, they sort of tolerated it for a little while, and then it got to a point where they said, like, I don't want to know you.
Your friend said that to you?
Yeah, like, if you're going to continue to do this, like, and they try to help me a lot, man. So I can definitely understand why they would want to walk away. But I think when I started to notice people started leaving at the back door as a result of my actions, that's what I think really inspired change. I think me and my sister, her and I, are very, very close. Even when I was going through some of the stuff, even she said, like, Lockie, like, you're treading water here. Like, you know, I'm going to distance myself from you now because you're doing this. And like, having someone like your best friend, your family member, your sister, say that to you, I think that's a bit of a wake up call, for sure.
We all need that, don't we? Like, I had a mate. I went through that same thing where I was almost people pleasing so much because I just wanted attention. I wanted friends. I wanted people to like me. I was so afraid that people weren't going to like me that I started to change myself fitting the situation that I was in. If girls like this type of guy, I was just going to be that type of guy. If girls like this, I was always like a chameleon. I was always putting masks on to be liked. I didn't know who I was or what I liked, but I knew what everyone else liked. So that's what I was trying to be the whole life.
Yeah, man.
And I was just like, wanted to, you know, I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what style of person or what my interests were. I was just going whatever was the trend. That's who I was. And I did that for years and realized I wasn't feeling validated. I wasn't feeling fulfilled. I was still feeling like this. And I was just like, oh, fuck being the nice guy. I'm just going to be a dickhead because fuck it. Like, who cares?
That's what gets the most attention.
That's what gets the most attention. So I didn't realize that I was, but I was being a bit of a fuckwit, to be honest with you. And this goes back to having, you know, amazing friends and family. I've got a friend who's still a really, really good friend of mine now. His name's Alex. I was having a house party and I was on drugs, off my head, you know, being a smart ass, just being a dickhead, to be honest with you, on purpose too. And he was sober, and he sat me down, and he's like, people who have never met you think you're a nice guy, but if they get to know you, you realize you're actually a fucking asshole. And then walked off. That was a really good friend of mine said that. And I remember sitting there, and that was just like the most sobering thing in the entire world. And like, I still, that happened 2017, and I remember that like it happened yesterday, you know, and I've never told him that to his face, that was such a wake up call for me. And I probably should tell him that. That moment there, I was just like, you're right. Like, you know, I'm being a dickhead on purpose just to get attention. You know, that's not me. You know, I don't want to be like this person. Like, I got to stop being the victim. I got to stop having this victim mindset. Like, poor Elliot. Like, you know, he's got shit going on, mate. Everyone's got shit going on. What gives you the right to be a dickhead and act out on it? You know, everyone's got their own battles they're going through. What makes you more important than anyone else? You know, and there was lots of sort of moments like that, lots of little turning points that sort of led me down a path where I am now. But I vividly remember like that moment, and I think it's so important to have friends that call you out, because, you know, that could have gone either way. You know, that could have caused a fight. You know, that could have caused an end of a relationship or a friendship there. But he took a risk and took a chance, and he was just like, stop being a dickhead, pretty much. And like, we're still such good friends now. And I look back at those moments, and I'm like, I'm glad he said that, because no one else did. I'm not saying everyone else was enabling me or anything like that, but no one really had the balls to be like, to say that straight to my face. And I appreciate it so much, and I value that so much in friends. I think we all sort of deserve friends like that.
We do, man. And I think, you know, from me experiencing that as well, I've also been the guy who said that to other people as well. You have. For sure, man. Yeah. You know, one of my best mates for 12, 15 years, he's battled the drink for many years. And, you know, same situation. When I was going through my really, really tough time, I didn't allow help from anyone. I didn't want to see help from anyone. I just pushed past it. But until people started to really, you know, sit me down and be like, this is where you're heading, Lockie, and we don't want to be part of it. That was a catalyst for my change. But, you know, with my best mate Tom, he's battled the drink for a while, and it's been in recent times in the last, you know, couple of months where I've sort of seen him out, and he just turns into a different person. And so I sat him down. I said, you need to do something about this. Like, I'll guide you in the way, but I can't make you drink. Like, you are seriously going to cause a lot of conflicts in friendships. And since then, he's navigated change, and he's seen someone, and he's working with a coach, a mentor, and he's doing a lot better. So I think, yeah, as shitty as those conversations are, I think they are definitely needed, because as much as I needed it as well from him back in the day, I also had to give it to him too. So it's that catch-22 that there's the silver lining.
And that's the thing I try to get to a lot of people. It's like, you know, they're so afraid to have these sort of uncomfortable and awkward conversations. And I'm thinking to myself in my head, I'm like, I'd rather have an awkward and uncomfortable conversation with a friend than be at their funeral.
100%.
You know, I'd rather ask the question and they go, no, I'm all good. I'd rather take the risk and ask someone and get to the bottom of it. And if it's all good, then we're all good. But I'd rather take the risk than not do it at all and then have regrets about sort of the path they were going to go down. I've always asked my guests, what are your 3 non-negotiables for living a healthy and full life? For me, it's movement, community, and good nutrition. I've learned that what you fill your body with plays a massive role in how you feel physically and mentally. That's why I use True Protein. They're an Aussie brand doing things the right way. Clean, natural supplements with no artificial additives or fillers. Everything's made in-house in Sydney's northern beaches using the highest quality ingredients sourced from around the world. Whether it's supporting energy, improving focus, or reducing fatigue, their products genuinely help me show up better every single day. And just like Mind Your Head, they live by values I stand by. Be true, be you, and take care of your whole self. When did you start posting on social media? And what was the reason there to start sort of putting yourself out there a bit more and trying to spread that message?
I think there's there's a funny component to this actually,
Okay.
and I think it's a part of my story, so I'm going to say it. But after I went through all of my adversity, and when I realized just how many men are actually struggling and who we don't talk about it.
Yeah.
I know growing up, I suffered from the stigma. Even my dad sort of instilled that a little bit into me, and he suffered from it too. And seeing the men around me, seeing the rising statistics, and I think me almost being one of those statistics too, looking myself in the mirror and being like, it's time that we change as a collective. I've always known that I wanted to, do something in the community and in society to, I guess, help make the world a bit of a better place. I think you can probably agree that the world's pretty negative, man. There's so much darkness. It's just like what we were talking about before we're on air, the comment section of some videos. It's like you're only trying to put out a positive message, but people put a negative twist on it.
It's like they're working harder to
It's like the devil's advocate, right?
Yeah.
For sure. And I think, me coming out on the other side of my sort of struggles, and I've sort of told my story to a couple of people, and they're like, oh, like that has merit. Like you should be really proud. And I'm like, yeah, I am proud for sure. But like, I don't want to make that my whole entire life. I don't want to keep rereading the same paragraphs, the same chapters. I want to start a new book and start a new story. And so I just want to see some positivity in a bit of a negative world, man. And I think some of the stuff that I've learned from my adversity and from my addictions, they've given me the tools and knowledge that I can be able to spread some happy words into someone who might be going through a period that I went through, because none of us in this whole entire world have deserved to feel like that we're any less than, or that we don't feel like our days are worth living, that we cut out short. I think everyone has a place in this world, man. Everyone, even the homeless guy on the street versus the CEO, they're still humans, man. And so I think I can't stand it when I see people shitting on other people, calling them, this or that. There's some horrible people in the world for sure, but I think at the depth of the core, we're all deserved to be here in one way or another, whether it be to live a life of fulfillment, to learn lessons, to, navigate through adversity so they can live their own life in a way that's going to inspire other people. But especially when I first started my podcast, I didn't feel like I couldn't start it because I was still snorting coke almost every day. If it wasn't every day, it was every weekend. I was still drinking. I can't put out a positive message if I'm not even living it myself. I think that's just going back to being authentic. I don't want to live a life of inauthenticity.
Be genuine, yeah.
For sure, man. Or, live a life outside of integrity. And I feel like I never could be in the space because I had to grow from my own problems and my own struggles. So I didn't allow myself to start, but I always knew that I wanted to. But then when I was sort of coming out of my addictions, and, when I was starting to do a lot better for myself, I noticed, hey, I could start doing this sort of thing. And I had to push past the fear of failure, the fear of judgment. That held me back for a long time, man.
Yeah.
The people who I used to go to school with, what are they going to think? The people who I used to party with, what are they going to think? They're going to say all these other things behind my back. For sure, man, go for gold, be my guest. It doesn't bother me anymore. But I had to push past that, and once I landed in a place where I feel like I could preach what I preach, then I started it. And the pin drop moment for me to start really posting content is one of my family members set me up on a blind date. And this is the funny component. I got set up on a blind date, and I was working away at the time, and we were in contact. And I was like, hey, I'll come check you out when I get home, rah. Yep, all good, perfect, sounds great. We sort of line up a date. Long story short, I get ghosted and stood up out of nowhere. And I sort of sat, I was just like, you know what? I'm going to show you what you're missing out on. For sure. I'm going to show you, like, boom. And I was just like, let's just start. And I started, posting videos from that day. My first ever video went viral on TikTok. And I think I took that as a sign of this could do something. So that situation was, I guess, the kickstart, but that faded pretty quick. And I just started doing it because I love it, man. And I genuinely do love posting content, what makes people feel seen, feel heard, feel like they are, they embody a sense of self-worth.
It's interesting, like those little kickstarters, because I had one where for years when I was playing footy, I felt like I had more to offer than just rugby. But at the same time, that's all I did, 24/7. That's all I did. Whenever anyone asked me about life, it would always be at, how's footy going? How's the body going? When's the next game? That's all it was. But But it got to a point where I started resenting that because I was like, oh, there's more to Elliot than just footy. But at the same time, I didn't show that. I wasn't doing anything else. But I resented people always asking me about footy. So I was just like, fuck, can we talk about something else? And I remember when I was like, I told some of my close friends, sort of some of their partners, that I was going to start a podcast. And they sort of laughed and went, and they didn't mean, they never meant to mean it like this, but they sort of chuckled and said, what are you going to talk about footy? Like saying that's all I can sort of chat about. And I remember, I didn't voice it to him, but I remember like that fucking really, really like got to me. That really triggered something inside of me that it wasn't them, it was me. It was my own insecurities and fears, and I was projecting it onto them. Why did that trigger me so much? You know, and I look deeper and it goes, because you haven't actually gone in discomfort before. You haven't put yourself out there before. You've always played in the safe space. You knew you were good at footy, and that's all you did. You know, you didn't try anything new, because when you try something new, you're going to suck at it. And I hated failing. I hated being shit at something. So once I sort of clung, rugby almost turned into an ego boost for me. When I played, I was just like, fuck yeah, I'm the man. I'm good at this. Like, in the rugby side, I'm like, I'm up here. I feel valued. I feel seen. I feel heard. I feel, I feel useful. But when I was like, I've got other interests. Oh, man, I have to start again. I have to start at the bottom. I have to be shit at something. That scared the shit out of me. So when these people said that, I was just like, oh, you think I can't do it? And I hate when people think I can't do something or tell me I can't do something. I'll just do it just to prove them wrong, Yeah. And that was almost a thing where I was just like, oh, you think I can't do it? In my head, and I was just like, I'm gonna show you. Same sort of like thing. I'm gonna show you. And then I started it, and then like after the first episode, I was like, I actually really love this.
Yeah.
Oh, this is actually the best. Oh, I could probably keep doing this forever. And then I was like, actually, this isn't so scary after all. Why did I think this was so scary for? And then I applied that fear that I used to run away from, that fear that I was, whenever fear came up in my life, I was just like, something to run away from. I don't want to feel like this. This can't be good. Fear must be bad. And obviously it's a deep, mechanism inside of us when we're fucking back in the caveman times, when you feel fear, it's obviously danger. But what I've realized now is, like, in my life where, when I feel fear, I almost use it as a tool or an indicator to go do something rather than not to go do something. Whereas before I used to be like, oh, I'll just run away from it. But now if fear comes up, I have a moment to pause, and I think, oh, this must be a sign that I should probably go do it. In my gut, I'm like, if it scares me a little bit, I'm like, yeah, I should probably go give this a go. And that's what I've realized, like, especially over the last 18 months, that when something scares me, it's a good indicator for me to do it.
100%. There's definitely been, posting content was scary. Yeah. Like, it's like you're opening yourself up to trolls online, to haters in the comments, to people DMing you about all this and that. But going back to when I got ghosted, like, I mean, when it started, it didn't come from a place of ego or a place of it came from a place of okay, this is the kickstart that I need to show the world what the world needs. And same thing with you and the footy and the podcast. It didn't come from a place of malice. It just gave you the kickstart that we all needed. I think it's healthy to have those too. Like, if I didn't get stood up on that day, maybe I wouldn't have even started posting content, because I would have held myself to the fear of judgment. So there's it's like a bit of a golden nugget, I guess, in a way, and I'm grateful for it, man.
Yeah, 100%.
I'm sure you are too. You've created this perfect space, and I think we all need a bit of a kickstart, even though in the moment it might be a little bit shitty. It was a little bit shitty. No one likes to get ghosted. But yeah, it's definitely
looking up the ass.
It was just like, oh no, this is what I needed to be able to kickstart and really land it in a place. And I've content. I love it, man. Love planning it. I love just talking and just putting a message out there, man. And I think one thing what really solidifies in me that what I'm doing is, I guess, making a positive impact. Whenever I receive a message from someone being like, this message saved my life, or
I was going to ask you that.
Or people.
Do you get that a lot, do you?
All the time, man.
Do you really?
Most of my DMs are people being like, this video saved me, thank you. Or like, thank you so much for everything you're doing. And
what a privilege, eh?
Dude, it's beautiful. And I don't receive hate at all. I don't receive a couple trolls here and there, maybe once in a blue moon, but because I'm putting out genuine love and I really want to see I want to change the world, man, and I really want to see the world be in a better place than what it is now. And I think because I show up with that, and I really try and instill it into every single one of my videos. You know, it's a beautiful space to be in, and hearing people, or if they come up to me in public and they're like, "Thank you, everything," like you're truly making an impact. It's like that fills my heart with so much love and so much warmth. There's been one message. It was a whole page, and I read it all, and I started tearing up in it because it's just like them expressing, you know, like they were hanging up the rope, and a video come up of mine, and they pulled down the rope by it, and from then they've started this huge journey of self-development. They've reached out, they've gotten help, they've moved things around in their life, all because of a 35-second video I posted on TikTok or Instagram. And I think that was like, yeah, that pulled me. I was like, this is my purpose, man.
Did you underestimate the power of a 30-second video?
Yeah, of course, all the time. And one thing I've noticed is, like, I'll record a clip and I might be like, oh, that's not quality. But then I sit myself back and I'm like, no, but that could really impact someone. I just post it anyway. So I think in the early days I used to hold back from posting stuff, but now I'm like, everything can be shared in a positive way.
Someone's going to connect to it.
Someone will connect to it for sure, and it shows by proof.
Do you feel like the stigma's changing, especially with men, in terms of seeing a man be so vulnerable and honest and real and genuine like yourself, talking about things and giving a positive message? Do you feel like there's a shift? There has been a shift?
A tiny bit. But we're still seeing 7 men per day. You know?
And that's the thing I want to ask you is that, you know, I don't have the answers. I'm sure, I don't know if you've got the answers, but there's been so much noise and there's so much advocacy about mental health, especially men's mental health. There's so much initiatives and charities and so much money and time getting spent into it, but the stats aren't changing, you know. And I'm at loss. I talk to my friends about it. You know, we're trying to have that open dialogue with men to talk about our feelings, but it doesn't seem like it's enough.
I think it's the men who resist they resist it all because they're still trying to live the life of the footsteps of their grandparents or the generation above.
Yeah,
I think so many, even men I still talk to now, whether they bring I'm still working construction, people still feel like they need to show up with an armor, with a mask on, think that everything's okay. There's so many initiatives, like you said, and charities, and so much money being thrown into programs and campaigns, but at the end of the day, it's society. Society is putting this view on mental health that if you're a man, you can't talk. That if you're a man, you have to show up, and you have to be the foundational pillar for many people, financially, in a love life, in a career. You know, you have to put on this brave face, but it just doesn't have to be like that. You know, and I think society has definitely continuing to put so much, you know, fire onto men there's like this preconceived notion that we have to have it all figured out by 30, 35. You need to have 20 grand in the bank by 25. You got to have a fucking house. You got to have the newest Land Cruiser. No, that's just society's view, and that's why men are still continuing to rise as statistics. Not enough is being done, especially in construction. That's where most of our suicide rates are. There's just not enough being done. You know, we can have all these external campaigns, charities, but if it's not going to be in direct contact with the male on a daily basis or a weekly basis, it's not going to change. And society has a lot to do with that.
Have you ever thought about how you're going to be as a father? You have?
I can't wait to be a father.
You can't wait to be a father?
Yeah. Not now.
No, yeah.
No way.
But are there things that say that you want to change when you're a father, how your father was parented you?
Yes.
What are some things that sort of spring to mind?
I think I've sat with this for a little bit, and I think what I come back to is I'm going to be the man I'm going to be the father to my kids that my dad was never to me.
Yeah. I'm
going to make sure that it's not transactional love, and that I show them love that they're worthy on a daily basis. And I've spoken on this with a couple of friends, and they've been like, "Oh, what gender do you want?" I'd be happy with, man, if I had a little son, he will be my best mate. My little best mate who I just do everything and everything with. And if I have a daughter, she's going to be my little princess, man. Oh, she will have me wrapped around her finger 100%.
Same.
Bro.
Yeah.
Oh, it's almost like I can't wait. I can't wait for it. But that's many years down the track.
Yeah. In terms of sort of, raising kids and having that, in terms of like young boys and having them emotionally aware of, something that I talked about with my dad is, I remember when I was a kid, like I was having all these feelings when I was at high school or primary school, but I couldn't put words to emotions. I didn't know what this emotion was. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know that it was normal. Why am I feeling like that? I was always resisting emotions because I didn't know what I was so scared of it. I talked to my dad and, I don't know if you're familiar with Gabor Mate. He's a psychologist. He's a sort of expert in trauma and early child development. And I went to a seminar here a couple of months ago, and part of the seminar he talked about was parenting, and which is super interesting because I'm like yourself. I can't wait to be a father. I'm really looking forward to it. And one of my sort of issues and things that I really worry about is passing my traumas on to my kids. Unknowingly, it happens, and I was really conscious of it because I'm doing so much work now that I don't want to sort of pass it on. And that was one of the questions I wanted to ask him, but a lady got up and she asked that same question: how do I not pass trauma on to my kids? And one of the things he said was, "Are you doing the work now?" She said, "Yes." Okay, well, that's one part of it, having that awareness early that you're trying to actually improve as a person. He goes, "If you want to be the best parent to your kids and not pass anything on, you got to be the best version of yourself. So you got to be doing the work." That's one of it. And he says, as hard as it is sometimes to protect your kids, you try to hide things from them. He said, there's points in time where it's okay to hide things from them, but overall, try not to hide things from your kids because kids know when you're lying. And he said, you shouldn't hide things from your kids. You should teach your kids ways to cope with reality instead of hiding from reality. Because if you don't sort of teach them the ways, we will find our own ways. Me and you found our own ways to cope with reality. Drugs and alcohol, often we will find the wrong ways to cope. And that's one of the things that I sort of went down, and I was really actually to be honest with you, I was actually quite fearful to be a father initially because I remember being a kid and being so lost and scared and anxious and worthless that I was like, fuck, I don't want my kids to feel like this. I was actually like, fuck, I don't want to pass. Remember telling Jordan, I was like, I don't want to pass this on to my kids. Like, I don't want my kids to go through this. And she's like, well, be the father that you never had. Show those, those qualities that you never got shown when you were a kid. And I was just like, oh, you're right. Like I can, we can change in a generation. We can shift that. We can stop those sort of those habits and those cycles that were happening in our generation. We can improve on that, and we can stop that. And when we're a father,
100%. And I think one of the things that fathers of our generation, they lack the emotional seenness. Allowing a child to be seen in emotions. And when I think about the father I'm going to be, it's like allowing your child just to know that everything what's happening internal is okay, and the opposite of depression is expression. If you allow yourself to be comfortable with having these types of conversation and showing up that emotions are all a part of being a man, sometimes it shows more strength than just bottling it in, because it shows the courage that you embody, that you can have the conversations and be vulnerable. Vulnerability is a gateway to growth, and I've sort of learnt that through my own vulnerability and my own, deep amount of, self-awareness and self-development, I should say, sorry. Everything is comes down from our parents, and if we want to be the best version of ourselves for our kids, then we have to do the inner work. And I think a lot of men lack that too. A lot of men lack the emotional intelligence to go and sit with themselves. Go and sit with yourself in a dark room by yourself, ask yourself the questions, and you'll be surprised at what comes up.
100%. Do you find that when you're posting this content, you're almost seen as the guy that has his shit together? That you're seen as like, oh yeah, Lockie's, he's offering so much good advice, he's sending such a good message, he must have it all figured out.
Yeah, man. I feel that pressure a lot.
You do?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I've been pretty open about it on my socials, but yeah, a month ago, my grandfather passed away. Him and I, we were best mates, and losing him was probably the hardest thing I've sort of been through in recent times, and I think noticing like the grief that I'm still grieving with, and allowing when he had leukemia, and he's been battling it for the past 5 years, and I knew the time was coming. But I think we've gotten so much closer over the last 5 years because I knew time was running out. And, it got to probably about 2 months ago when we had to stop his blood transfusions because they just weren't working. And I watched him decline within 2 weeks. I could have a conversation with him, all good, great conversation as always. And then 2 weeks later, I walk into where he was staying and it's just his body. I chose to go and see him after he passed just so I could sit and just observe and just put myself in his shoes and be like, if I was in that position, would I be happy with the life I'm living? And because I've done quite a bit of internal work, but nothing can ever prepare you for, that sort of situation. And I was also, a few other things happened. I was sort of seeing someone that crumbled down pretty quick, and I was also navigating that. And so that's probably about a month ago, and I've sort of noticed myself, there's been a weekend or two over the last couple of months that I've resorted back to past behaviours. And I was really keen, I was wanting to, come out and say that because, on Instagram, it looks like I've got it all figured out, man, but I don't. I'm just another man showing up in this space, trying to pull a positive light in the world, and I'm a human. I go through my own stuff,
Yes, you're not perfect.
I'm not perfect. I'm perfectly imperfect, if you will. I think that's where we all are. But I think, I definitely do feel the pressure to think that, to show up with this front that I have it all figured out. But, I'm still navigating the grief with Granddad. And I think me resorting back to past behaviours a few weeks ago, it was just a way of subconsciously dealing with that grief. And it's just a reflection that, I've still got work to do. I'm still...
Some small reminders.
Small reminders, but I think because I've acted on, allowing myself to feel the feelings post slipping up with alcohol and the bag, and it's I've already embodied so much more growth from that because it's showed me a path of a newfound way of self-development. I'm asking myself more questions. I'm sitting with myself more. I'm doing more internal work now than I was beforehand. So I think like these slip-ups, they mean something. They always teach us something.
100%.
And it's teach me a big lesson. It come off the back end of losing one of my best mates to cancer, but I'm a better person for it.
It really puts life in perspective, doesn't it, eh?
It does, man. I'm definitely, even the life I'm living now, internally within my own self is different to how I was living 2 months ago.
Really?
Just from everything that's sort of come up and gone and happened.
What's the if you could go back and sort of chat to that 11-year-old Lockie, what would you say to him?
It's funny, I did timeline therapy the other day and I went back to that version.
Did you?
Yeah, and I meditated into it and I breathed into it, and I was literally, he was right in front of me, young little Lockie, and he looked lost. He looked sad, and I asked him what he needed from me, and the inner child, literally, he said, "I just want guidance. I want love. I want to be held. I want to be seen," because I didn't feel it from anyone growing up. And if I was to, and I looked back at him and I said, remind yourself of everything that you are, because you're doing the best you can with what you have. I think a lot of us, our inner child screams at us, and I abandoned him. I abandoned the little Lockie. Growing up through childhood, I pushed him to the side and I chased external validation from other people. But yeah, I think going back to little Lockie, if I was to tell him something again right now, it's just everything will work out. Surround yourself with people who are going to go places and not drag you down.
And that's the thing, like a lot of us, all of us carry around that little version of ourselves that haven't healed properly.
Yeah.
And I've read a few things, and a lot of this guy that I follow, he says, when he comes up, what do you do? And a lot of people say, I push him away. I try to ignore him. I try to, numb him. I'll try to do drugs and alcohol. I'll try search for other things. I'll try to get away from that person, that little person of yourself. He goes, don't do that. He goes, when he comes up, give him a hug, take him with you. 360 was on the podcast, and he talks about that little version of himself, and he says, I used to abandon him. I used to get rid of him, and now I take him up on stage with me. He's my buddy.
Yeah, I love that.
He's my mate. Instead of trying to get rid of him, take him with you. I love that. Are you you spoke about it before, we releasing more episodes on the podcast? How are we going with that?
My one?
Yeah, your one.
I'm currently going through a rebrand.
Rebrand?
So I'm rebranding it, and I want to have more of a reach, more of an audience, more opportunity to instill positive conversations and powerful conversations like these ones. Yeah. I've shied away from the podcast this year, just because I'm still working full time, and it's hard to navigate that.
It's hard.
And I want to, if I'm going to do it again, I'm going to go all in. So I've got a lot of things in the works at the moment, and I've got a new name for it.
Oh, are we saying it, or are you keeping it under the wraps?
I'll keep it under the wraps for now.
Okay.
I'll tell you off air.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's going to be. I'm really excited for it, man. Yeah. It's going to be something it's going to really bring meaningful conversations. I was having a meeting with Mark Butler last week. He's the Minister of Health for Australia, for the Labor Party, and him and I were chatting about some of the implementations in men's health, what's coming up with the new budgets. Yeah, $32 million is getting shoved into men's health movements and campaigns. So that's something really exciting to look forward to. I got some super exciting things in the works, man. Yeah, sick. And it's all started from posting that one video.
Yeah. Isn't it crazy how your life can change after one video online? Like the reach, and it's incredible. Yeah.
So there's a lot to come for sure. The podcast is going to be awesome, man. I'm super excited to have.
Yeah. I want to see more of it. Yeah.
Don't worry, brother. Come to a cinema near you.
Yeah, cinema. Yeah, nice. You said before that you want to, earlier on, that you want to leave an impact on the world. That's why, you one of the reasons why you joined the military, you want to leave an impact. Yeah. What does leaving an impact now mean for you?
If I can get to my deathbed and know that I've made someone's life a little easier, I think that's a healthy impact.
I love that.
If I can run that ball up to the top of the footy field and score that try, and everyone look behind me, and I turn around and I've seen an amount of people who I've helped, or if I've seen a change in the numbers, which we will be seeing a change in the numbers in due time. I want to get those numbers to zero. Fuck, man. If the day that happens would be,
happiest day ever.
Oh, mate.
Yeah.
Knowing that there's men in the space who have changed lives like you're doing as well. Once we all realize that we've done the work and we've sort of implemented it into society and the community, but men feel safe to be able to have those conversations and not turn to the black dog. I think that's a life worth living.
What's a safe space mean? Obviously, it means a lot of things to a lot of different people. Creating a safe space.
I think it's having that internal connection.
It does, yeah.
When you can sit with someone and feel no judgment at all, you can lay off everything that's going on inside your mind. There's a 10,000 more times thing. There's 10,000 more things going on inside of a man's head than anyone can ever be able to comprehend. I think, especially with females, I think a lot of men, we struggle to open ourselves up to females because we're scared that we're going to get judged. The fear of failure and the fear of judgment within that. I think if you have a safe space with a woman, that is in the most insane space. And I think helping the numbers with suicide in men comes under both parties, under both umbrellas. Women have such a big, player in our lives of being able to hold emotional space. I'm sure there'll be a day when I meet the love of my life, and the space what's going to be held is going to be something I think can benefit everyone. And I'm sure you can experience it with your partner.
Oh, mate, I didn't tell her initially how bad things got for me, because I wanted this perception that I was Superman. I wanted this perception that she could count on me no matter what, that I could look after the family, I could be a provider, a protector, I could keep her safe. And I was so scared to tell her that at one point in my life that I was it got so bad that I don't want to be alive anymore. I was so scared to say that to her because I didn't want her to have this preconceived idea that when I was having a bad day, that I was going to fall back to what happened years prior.
Yeah.
Because I was just like that. And in her eyes, I want to be, the man, And it only got to that point where I was hiding so much, I wasn't expressing my full emotions. I wasn't being real with her, that she could tell. She was just like, why don't you ever open up? Why don't you ever talk about it? And I'm like, and I finally did. And she goes, well, that's the strength there. The strength is actually voicing about it and knowing that I'm not going to look at you any differently. I'm not going to be worried that if I don't get a phone call from you, that you're going to be off, depressed or something like that. And that's that fear. I was so scared of her thinking that I wasn't. I was really scared of her having a life with me and her worrying about my mental state. I was really, really worried about that. And it wasn't until we actually had an open dialogue and talked about it that all my worries and fears and insecurities were actually built up in my own head, were all false. A lot of the time we overthink things and what we think isn't actually what reality is. And that's what I found anyway.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people are different, but all these worries and things that I was thinking that she was going to say or how she was going to think were not accurate at all.
Yeah.
And then reality was it was all good. And all I needed to do was talk about it more. And the more I opened up about having bad days and things that are going in my head, and actually opened up that I've got social anxiety. I get anxious a lot, and me trying to hide it, it's just more obvious that I've got anxiety at that time. You try to hide things and try to mask it. It's just more obvious that you're actually struggling. And that's what especially when you be with someone for so long and you live with someone, they can pick up on certain cues and they can tell straight away if you're not feeling right. And that was me trying to mask it and me trying to lie about it. And she was just like, I can tell, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's been a beautiful thing where I can, have that unconditional love where you can open up and be yourself and not be judged.
And that's a safe space, right?
That's a safe space.
Yeah.
I love that. We've got some quick fire questions to end, so you can answer these as quickly or as long as you want. Your three, do you want to blow your nose?
I'm all good.
You're good? You sure?
Yeah, I'm all good.
What are your three non-negotiables for living a healthy and full life?
Do the things you say you're going to do. A reflection of your life is a reflection of the internal. Surround yourself with people who motivate you to be better.
Love that. What's the best advice you've ever received?
Don't take advice from people who aren't where you want to be.
How have you defined success?
A healthy home, healthy relationships, self-love.
Who's your hero?
Me in 10 years.
Yes, love that. I asked Harry this one, our mutual friend. What does a mentally healthy life look like for you?
Allowing your ebbs and flows to come through with zero judgment.
Love that. If you could go back to a time in your life, where would you go and why?
Asking Stuart if he was okay.
Mm. Is that a regret?
I wouldn't say it is.
Mm.
Because I potentially wouldn't be in the position I am now if I did ask him if he was okay.
Mm.
I think it's just it solidifies more that someone who on the outside looks happy tends to be the person who's struggling the most. And I think that situation with him, it's allowed me to have more empathy for people, and it's allowed me to ask questions a lot more.
Yeah, it definitely helps you. I think the more connected you are with yourself, the more you're sort of open to connect with others. And I think when you go through those sort of situations, it makes you look through the surface a lot more, rather than just take someone from face value and say, oh no, they're all good. Yeah. It makes you really think, are they?
Yeah, it's like, you can sit down with someone and ask if they're okay. Yeah, brother, I'm all good. No, bro.
Oh, yeah.
What's going on?
Because I put something out on my socials, sort of talking about my own story, and I had a few mates from footy message, and they say, I would never have, dude, I had no idea. I've never have thought that you would be the person that would have gone through that stuff. And I said, yeah, that's the point. I was trying to hide it. I did my very, very best to hide it from everyone, that I was overly happy. I was overly excited. I was overly joyful around life, because on the inside I wasn't. And as soon as I left footy training, as soon as I got home, the mask came off, and I was just like back in the hellhole again.
Yeah.
What do you wish more people understood about you?
There's two answers here.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is nothing. I don't care.
You don't care, yeah.
The next one is, I genuinely do want to see healthy change in the world.
You do?
Yeah, I do, man.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
I had a guy message me the other day, and he was like, oh, Lockie, you live on the Gold Coast, so do you actually care about the way you think? Or do you actually care about the people? Or are you just doing it to look clever? And it came through, and I'm like, what? And I replied, I was like, I'm struggling to understand how where I live brings this, preconceived image that I don't care with what I'm actually doing. Then he just replied, all good. I didn't open it, but
it's like the Gold Coast is the hub of being fake and pretentious, that you can't live there and spread a good message, can you?
Exactly right, man. Yeah, they're the two answers. Yeah, I don't care what people think, and there's nothing more I want to be understood by. But then on the other hand, I really am trying to change the world,
to do a good thing.
Yeah, man. Oh, I dream of it. I sit down and I'm just like, what can we do? What can we do?
I love that, bro. And thank you so much for coming onto the podcast today, man. It's been a blast. It's so good to sit down with you and get to know you on a more personal level. Like I said at the start, I admire and respect you so much. I love the work that you're doing and the effort and energy that you're putting into it. You're definitely shifting the needle. The ripple effect of what you're doing is outstanding. Obviously, all the people that are affected by what you do, and I'm really excited for the future for you, man. I can't wait to see what's happening.
Thanks, bro. It's really nice to come into space like this and share a bit of my story and to have powerful conversations about mental health and how we can see a bit of a change. And I want to give you grace too for opening up about some of your stories too. It's really nice to be able to share vulnerability with another man who collectively is just trying to put out a good message too. So likewise, man, I'm excited to see where this goes for you, and I'll always be here to support you.
Yeah, thanks, brother. Appreciate it.
Big love, man.
Thanks so much for listening to another episode of Mind Your Head. If you'd like to support the show, be sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcasts. It really supports the show and helps others discover us. Don't forget to join us on Instagram and TikTok at mindyourhead.podcast.